If you like the sweet science, get ready to talk boxing on the Gloved Fist podcast with top boxing writers Frank Latirzo and Jack Hirsch. Frank, a former amateur boxer out of Philadelphia, writes for NY Fights and can be seen on the Boxing Channel. Jack, an amateur boxer who competed in the New York Golden Gloves, was a 6-term president of the Boxing Writers Association. And now, here's Frank Latirzo and Jack Hirsch.
And we're back. Welcome to Glove Fist Boxing Show. We talk a lot of boxing. We also talk a few other sports. Tonight, I think we'll be touching on something else besides boxing because of our guest that will be on in about 10 minutes. My name is Frank Latirzo, former writer, former fighter, try to be a full-time observer, joined by former 6-term president of the Boxing Writers Association of America, Jack Hirsch. Jack, how are you tonight?
Hey, good, Frank. We're not going to be touching on this for long, but it is another sport kind of, and I know you'll back me up on this complaint with this modern technology. I have ESPN Plus, Frank. I wanted to watch a little bit WrestleMania. I haven't watched wrestling for a while, but ESPN gave it such a build-up. I'm trying to get on. I have the app. I can't get on. I'm an old-timer like you. I'm maybe tech slow, put it that way. So I give it to my wife who's good at stuff like that. She's playing around 10, 15 minutes and can't get on. And I'm paying for this stuff. So
who were you? Did you have a rooting interest? Because, I
wanted to watch it, Frank. And we're getting the same nonsense you went through with boxing. With the show in Saudi Arabia, you were trying to give them your money and they wouldn't take it.
Jack, and it's what's happening with sports. I haven't followed it that much, but I see the Sixers are in the playoffs. And I didn't realize till the game was over that they played the Celtics yesterday. I didn't even know Embiid was not playing. And I was thinking, all right, let me watch the game. I think the next game is tomorrow night, game 2. It's on Peacock. I think I have Peacock, but I'm not sure.
Well, what's that? It wouldn't be a show if we couldn't start off with some type of complaint. Boxing-wise, Frank, we sent up Esther Shadisa Green, female fighter who got stopped Friday night and had a brain bleed. She was taken out on a stretcher. I didn't like the way ESPN handled that either. Not Christine Poucher, the broadcaster. She was fine. She showed a lot of compassion, but they were, even though they were informing us what was going on, they weren't somber the way they should have been. They're asking opponent, what do you think, with your next fight, with this, what do you think your performance tonight? I'm paraphrasing.
Those were the questions they were asking?
Yeah, they should have focused on Green, her condition, held off. It was the semifinal, actually, before the main event or the co-main event, whatever, before, Alice Baumgartner fought. And I understand the show goes on. You have to go to the main event and you have to describe the fight. But to just see the interview in the ring afterwards, someone's taken out on a stretcher, and it's like business,
not good.
Like usual. They'll say something, we're concerned, we hope for the best. She's in our thoughts and our prayers. And by the way, what do you think your performance tonight? I mean, I'm paraphrasing, but stuff like that.
Well, Jack, my feelings on ESPN. They leave a lot to be desired on many levels.
Lee, wait. Lee Gross points out something that's accurate here. In order to have gotten WrestleMania, you had to upgrade from ESPN Plus. I'm paying extra money for ESPN Plus, Frank, to ESPN Unlimited. What the heck is ESPN?
I didn't even know that existed.
Unlimited? And what are they charging for ESPN Unlimited when we were going on? They weren't saying anything with how much more it's going to cost. It's gotten to be crazy.
It is a joke. I'm telling you, wait till a couple seasons come by and you have to pay for your NFL games like you do for pay-per-view boxing. You'll see. That's where we're going. We're kind of there now.
Yeah, kind of to a degree. You had a great reaction 3-4 weeks ago when it took place right before, when I told you the Keith Thurman, Sebastian Pandora was pay-per-view, you were like flabbergasted. I wish you saw your own reaction. Like you couldn't believe it. Pay-per-view for Keith Thurman, Sebastian Pandora. It's the best.
The fight went exactly how everyone thought it would go.
The best thing to do, catch it on YouTube right after. Pretty good light heavyweight / cruiserweight fought this weekend. Ben Whitaker from the UK.
First round KO.
First round KO. You saw it on YouTube an hour after his fight. If you don't mind finding out the result right after, then you're better off just seeing it on YouTube. You're not seeing, you might lose in the suspense factor. Not that fight would have much suspense, because sometimes in YouTube they do a caption underneath. For example, Wilder and Chisora, when they fought, it wasn't the fight, even though they were two old war horses, it was a little bit intriguing still, as much as I hate to admit it. And I watched it afterwards. But when you know the result, Frank, and
that takes something off of it. And I like watching it live, Jack. I'm sorry, I don't care what anyone says.
Yeah.
You get the real feel watching it live. How many fights have we watched that we saw them live and then went back and watched it on tape and said, yeah, well, not quite what we thought.
Yeah, like, for example, you're right. One of the worst heavyweight fights was Jimmy Ellis, Jerry Quarry. Bad fight. But I remember the suspense of how the fight was going along, what the decision was going to be, how the fight was unfolding. That kept it entertaining. But if you knew the result, how many people would watch the 15 rounds after? Yeah, it would be really hard to have.
And I've watched it a few times since then, and it's not easy. And I was a fan of both guys. And in my life, I was 10 years old then. That was a big fight.
Yeah.
At that time.
Some good fights started taking place. I mean, Inoue, Nakatani, Du Bois, Wardley, Ramirez.
Zurdo and Benavidez.
Right. And then in June, Boutsinis against Zayas. I mean, there are good fights taking place. I won't call them necessarily the best possible matchups, but they are good, solid fights. The one from Japan with Inoue, the problem is with his opponent, Nakatani. He was the one fighter they thought might be able to unseat Inoue, but in his last fight,
he won the distance
so poorly and won a very controversial decision that people who feel he lost that fight. So it kind of took the luster off, the Inoue.
All right, Jack, I want to have a little fun with you though, because
we're gonna have.
I told you last week that Conor Benn was a one fight deal and he got 15 million. He got close to that. And now he just re-upped and signed a multi-fight deal, which has nothing to do with the deal for the fight he got against Regis Prograis. So Conor Benn is managing his career well. And he's probably the highest paid fighter in boxing per talent wise and excitement.
You could, that's a good category, Frank. You just admit it. Pound for pound value for what the guy has talent wise, who gets paid the most for lack of talent. Maybe Edgar Berlanga would win that, actually. We're going to have a good guest. We're going to be having him on in a minute. It's James Smitty Smith, and he has this podcast, In This Corner, great podcast with Lee Groves. And he's done an amazing amount of things. And, I would love to see Smitty win the Broadcast Award from the Boxing Writers Association of America, the Taub Award. I'm an advocate. You got to campaign harder, Lee Groves, for Smitty. I know you've been campaigning from hard, but you got to get down and dirty, Lee, to do that. And Smitty also, he did something historical right before I put him on. He's broadcast a ton of fights. He broadcast the first fight ever on the internet. First fight ever. So that's historical. Let's get him on now for 30 seconds early. Let's get Smitty on. He's done other things that I'm going to set you up with, Frank, that you're going to love. Hey, Smitty, can you just, we gave you the intro right before you came on, and I ripped into Lee Groves. He's got to campaign harder for you, Lee. I mean, Come on. I mean, you were out there for Lee to get the Good Guy Award. You are in the forefront. Lee's too much of a gentleman. He should start cursing people out. A little toughness might get you over the top.
Thank you. Great to be on with you, Jack. Congratulations on the book on Michael Spinks. And I always dig hearing Frank. He's got some interesting stuff and he tells it like it is. And I usually agree with him.
Right. But let me, right before I want to get Frank involved with you in this conversation.
You're going to lose, Jack. You're going to lose. You know that, right?
No. It's not a debate. This is good stuff.
No. I know where you're going.
No, not this time. I'm looking out for you this time, Frank. You're going to love this. But I just want to ask Smitty, the first internet show, who fought on that show? Do you remember?
I know it was a Freeman Barr was in the main event. It was in Punta Gorda.
Steve Canton's guy.
Yeah.
Wow.
It was a Steve Canton show. And my dear friend Hank Kaplan was there with me, who actually promoted a couple of my fights and found guys that I could beat, which was very difficult back on Miami Beach.
Smitty, you have done amazing things. Outside of everything you've done, you had 2 sidebar things that are incredible. And I'm going to turn it over to Frank in a second. But I got to tell you, Frank, you saw before the show the Miami Dolphin banner there. Well,
I had that exact banner in my bedroom.
But you asked Smitty, did he go to any games? Smitty was the ball boy for the unbeaten Miami Dolphin team.
One of them with David Shula.
David Shula, exactly. I remember that. I was so jealous of David Shula at that time.
My dear friend, the late David Grant, who's no longer with us. I'll give you the story quickly. It's in my book. I'm actually working on my book now. I was blessed to be in Miami, born and raised there. But in the early 70s, it was typical for me to be with Muhammad Ali at the Fifth Street Gym. And later on in the afternoon, be with Paul Warfield and the Miami Dolphins. But this great story happened after the Dolphins lost Super Bowl VI to the Dallas Cowboys. We were all gathered. I had already been given the job as one of the ball boys, and we were all in this room, and there was, I think, like an 8mm tape, and Shula put on the Cowboys broadcast, the NFL half-hour thing that they did. And he said, I remember him yelling at me because I was back by the light, and he said, little Jimmy, he called me Jimmy because my name's James Smith. Little Jimmy, turn off the damn light. That's how he said it to me. I turned off the light. We proceeded to watch the tape of the Dolphins losing that game to the Cowboys. And then he said, kid, turn on the damn light. Yelling at me again. I turned on the light. And then Shula went on to give this wonderful speech about what did you think, guys, watching that? How does it feel watching that? We got to the Super Bowl. It means nothing without ultimately winning the Super Bowl. And I was with that team all day. I would get there about 7 a.m. in the morning and stay because Shula had 4 damn practices a day. Paul Warfield was the first one to would have me on his radio and television shows back then. I became very, very close with Marlon Briscoe and the late, great Mercury Morris. But I was with that team every day. And any team from the New England Patriots of 2007 and the 85 Bears or this great 49er teams, there's only one team residing in Perfectville, and that's the 1972 Miami
Smitty, I am actually more jealous of that than I am you being in the Fifth Street Gym with Ali, because as a kid, I was fascinated by Don Shula. It's funny too, because how I met Zonka and Kick was we went in 1970. We took a family vacation. We drove down from Haddonfield, New Jersey to Miami Beach, and we stayed at the Balmoral Hotel, which was right next door to the Fontainebleau, or maybe one hotel away. Maybe the Americana was in the middle. Anyhow, we go to dinner one night at the Fontainebleau, and at that time the show Flipper was a big deal. My brother and I like watching Flipper because of the Dolphin, and find out that Shula, not too long, a couple of months before that, was hired as the coach, and he's sitting there at the dinner. He and Zonka and Kick are having dinner, and we got word of it. And I said to my dad, can we go up? He says, if they're not eating, you can go up and you can say hi. You cannot ask for an autograph. We did, shook hands with all 3 of them. My brother and I were hooked at that point. I remember watching the Christmas Day game, the first playoff game against the Raiders, and I cried when they lost to the Cowboys. I had a feeling they were going to lose that game because their Super Bowl was against the Colts the week before when they, with the 5 great blocks, 21-0. And I've been a Dolphins fan ever since then. I live and died with that team. During those years, Larry Zonka is probably my all-time favorite non-fighter athlete. And I'll shut up, but I'll close with this. I have said for years, if Jerry Rice is the greatest all-time receiver in the NFL, Paul Warfield's number 2. And Smitty, think of his numbers. 20 yards a catch he averaged on 2 teams that were built around Jim Brown and Larry Zonka and Leroy Keys. What would his numbers be? Think about this, 427 receptions, 85 touchdowns. He has half as many receptions as Michael Irving and 2 more touchdowns.
Okay, so that's a great way to tell you what made that team so special. You got to understand, Paul's like not only a friend, he's like a father to me. Lee Groves and I had him on the show about a year or so. And I, for you, I'm going to do this because I told Lee, and Lee's been bitching at me. I'm going to get Zonka on the show. I'm going to get Larry on the show. But Paul knew that, Ali and Warfield, 2 black guys that were in their early or late 20s, they meet this little bucktooth white kid, and Ali confided a lot in me that he shouldn't, and so did Warfield. And Paul would talk to me about his frustration, but that he understood that he was doing, even when he wasn't going to be in a play, he still made a difference.
Open the defense up.
Yeah, and Paul knew that. That team was the most selfish team. And that's what made them so great. And every player knew what the other player was going to do. If you ever watch, that's what, that 21-0 game over. I was there at that game against the Colts, and you talked about how quickly when Dick Anderson got that interception, they shifted.
5 blocks.
It was unbelievable. That was one of the great illustrations. I'm talking about it in my book. This is the first time I've ever actually talked about my book that's not done. About that play is such a great microcosm of what would be 72. And Frank and Jack, the 73 team was even better. They lost a couple games.
Oh, I remember they were 12-2. They were better, and they won their playoff games decisively. And like the year before, just a little more football, of course, before the boxing.
They lost to the Raiders that year. They lost to the Raiders in game 2, 12-7 in Miami. And then I forget the other loss, I think may have been to the Colts in that year, but they killed it in the playoffs. They went through everybody. And then the WFL came along and disintegrated the team.
Paul called me that when he signed that day, and he kind of gave me a little heads up on it. But I for me, again, to be a part of, I think, the greatest sportsman ever in Muhammad Ali, and then to be with that team, I guess I was meant to do whatever the hell I do and have done.
Smitty, interesting question here. We have a debate show, and a few years ago when we had Jim Jeffcoat, the former great cowboy, on, we were discussing Marlon Briscoe. I brought him up. And Marlon Briscoe was part of that unbeaten team, but Marlon Briscoe was deprived of being the first real starting quarterback in NFL history because of racism, point blank. They didn't want a black quarterback at the time. Was Briscoe, what would he have been better off? Would he have been better off being a history-making quarterback, not winning anything necessarily, not winning anything at all, but being a perennial starter as a black quarterback and never being on the Dolphin team? And not being given a chance to start, and I'm not counting the Denver Broncos.
Yeah, I get the question. Here,
right.
Quickly.
And Jim Jeffcoat just said, as a competitor, he was better off being on the Dolphin team.
Yeah,
but I'm not sure.
Marlon, my football career, I played Pop Warner High School at Carroll City, 2 years at Minnesota Tech, a 2-year school. I was a little 5'6", 140-something pound receiver who could run a 4.5 40. Marlon brought me to Colorado, where he was an assistant coach, and he was the one who told me, you're going to be too small. Go to Omaha, where I played, because he played at Omaha. He played at Nebraska Omaha and was a star there. and I went there, and then I decided to quit. But to answer your question swiftly, the best thing Marlon's life, he belonged in Miami. He belonged as part of that team. He too made key receptions, and when he replaced Howard Twilley as the starter, and then he made key receptions, key touchdowns, and I think he was upset with the way things were going racially, the stuff that you mentioned. He was a very small, diminutive quarterback. And I think if you wrote his career out, it went right the way it was, historic as a black quarterback in the NFL, and then ends up, as part of the Miami Dolphins perfect team and wins a couple of Super Bowls with the Dolphins. Marlon was a wonderful guy. I have some stories about him I can't tell, but I loved him.
Frank, before anything more football, you want to ask Smitty before we veer to Muhammad Ali?
Smitty, let me ask you this. I assume you're still a Dolphins fan. It's hard, isn't it? Isn't it hard? I mean, since they beat the 85 Bears, I don't think there's been a lot to celebrate about. And I think that they're one of the most dysfunctional franchises in the NFL the last 25 years. I'll always root for the uniform, but my heart isn't in it like it was.
No, I 100% echo those sentiments. The franchise has been, even after Shula gone, Shula left, I knew it was kind of over. It's a shame Marino, because I do think Marino is on the short list of the greatest quarterbacks, pure passers ever. It's a shame that he never got to win one. But yeah, they're in disarray. They seem to continue to be in disarray. And I watched them, and kind of like the Hurricanes, because at one point, that's why I was glad this year I got to actually root for my Hurricanes later in the year. But I don't follow them like I used to. I admit, man, I'm kind of stuck in those 70s. Sorry.
My best football night this year was when the Hurricanes beat the Buckeyes on New Year's Eve.
Now, Smitty, you had a heck of a childhood hanging around the Fifth Street gym with the greatest Muhammad Ali. Tell us how that was.
So, my uncle, who was my ill-fated manager in my boxing career when I was a kid, said, I know you love Ali. Do you want to meet him? And I said, yes. And he said, here's what you got to do. We're going to go to the gym where we had already been. And he said, you got to camp outside on the corner by the drugstore. And I'm not helping you. I have not. And so I took a jacket that I still have. You might see it somewhere in the background there, and I wrote Muhammad Cassius Clay Ali. And then I wrote something on the back. And the first Sunday I waited, he didn't show. The second Sunday I stood there for about maybe an hour, and I see all these a lot of little short Jewish people on Miami Beach heading, and I could see all of a sudden this towering figure, two tall black dudes heading my way. Muhammad Ali comes, and as soon as he catches eyesight with me, kind of had to look way down, and he comes up to me, and he turns me around, and he reads the jacket, and he puts his arm around me and walks me up. And then we go up the rickety, stairs at the Fifth Street gym. And he told Sully there at the, let this little white boy is my main man. Don't ever charge him again. And I walked in, and from that moment on, I was part of that inner circle. And thank God to my sixth grade teacher, Mr. Wilson, who would let me skip school because he loved Ali, to supposedly write a report about the fight, which I did, but I was skipping school a lot to be with Muhammad Ali. And that is when it started for that first fight with Joe Frazier. And the irony was I would end up doing the last television interview with Joe Frazier on my television show. Not long before Joe died, he was in Vegas, and I did the last television interview with him. And I ended up having a love for Frazier, not quite as much as Ali, who I knew, but Frazier's at the top of my list for the fighters I admire and love the most. And I'm honored that I was able to do that interview with him and get to know him. I know Frank would know a little thing or two about the Philadelphia fighters.
Oh, Frank worked out. He fought out at Joe Frazier's gym.
I know. Yeah, I know.
You know what I can't figure out?
Fifth Street gym. He was in Smoking Joe's gym.
And then when I fought professionally, I trained there. Alexis Arguello actually spent about 20 minutes showing me how to throw my right hand, and a few nights later I scored one of the few knockouts I had. But I got to be there with Luis Rodriguez and Florentino Fernandez and Gomio Brennan and Duran. I think the Fifth Street Gym, which is no more, don't believe the bullshit of the one they call Fifth Street Gym now. The Fifth Street Gym is gone. It's been gone. But when it was there, it was one of the great gyms of all time, run by the Dundee brothers, Chris Dundee, who promoted a couple of my fights, and of course, the great Angelo Dundee.
I visited the gym in 1980, and you could tell it wasn't the same. It was in its heyday, in the 60s, maybe early 70s, and then it was never the same. Like you mentioned, Luis Rodriguez, guys like that. I mean, Luis Rodriguez could have been an all-time great. It's unfortunate, he held the title only a little while, and
one defense, 3 months.
Was on the verge of winning the middleweight title. He just happened to get caught by Nino Benvenuti. That wouldn't happen if they fought 100 times. It wouldn't happen again, but it happened, the one-punch KO. Now, from what you had mentioned, that was fascinating. For years, you were in denial. I heard you say before, being so close to Ali, figuring, he was robbed against Frazier in the first fight. But eventually you kind of came around.
I can't, and it was Muhammad Ali.
Make that two of us.
Yeah, Muhammad Ali was on my radio show. He was already into the Parkinson's, but he told me on the air, I lost it. And I went home, and I remember telling my then wife, my ex-wife now, that how could I have been so stupid? Because later on, calling thousands of fights on television, I prided myself in being as good as I could possibly be, really trying to score a fight. And there was just I mean, Ali won some rounds and Frazier suffered a lot of damage, but it was no doubt that Joe won the fight, by at least 3 or 4 rounds. And then you've got the knockdown in 15. And I think in round 11, they could have called
that's a 2-point round today.
Yeah, exactly.
Today, but that time it wasn't, though, and
Smitty.
And people scored even rounds at that time, what they don't really do today.
Let me tell you how I came to it. Now, I went to the fight, and I was in denial, even though inside I knew. But after the fight, the kid that lived across the street from me was a Frazier fan. I was an Ali fan. We bought the Super 8mm highlight video of it. I bought the fight. He had the projector, so we needed each other. He couldn't see the fight without me. I couldn't see the fight without him. So one night, we're in his attic. We're watching the fight. And every time Ali's landing jabs, I'm saying, look, he's winning this fight. He's outlanding Frazier 3-1. Well, my friend Guy, his name was Guy, I turn around. He fell asleep. Okay? I'm doing all the theatrics and he's asleep. So I sit down and this metamorphosis happened, and a voice came on and said, Frank, if you landed from another planet and you just didn't know who these guys were, who's winning this fight? The tall guy in the red trunks or the short guy in the green trunks? And I said, the short guy in the green trunks is getting the better of it a little bit each round. And at that point, I let go and I said, I'll never let my bias get in the way. I probably watched the fight 500 times. If you give Ali every break in the book, it's 8-7 Frazier. And if you score it like you didn't know who they were, it's 9-6 Frazier. Maybe 10-5.
Yeah.
Or 9-5-1.
Do you guys agree with me? And I say it all the time when I do speaking engagements and think, I think it's one of the greatest fights, but it's the greatest sporting event ever. No question. No question.
Nothing compares. I was lucky to wind up having a last row seat as a teenager, and I got it on a fluke. I found out from Tommy Kenville, who was one of the people, worked at Madison Square Garden, who was in charge of dispersing tickets. And I mailed cash in the mail too. That's crazy, like a $20 ticket to sit in the last row, because the Garden sold out immediately, but there were few single seats left in the whole arena. And somehow, as fate would have it, they got to my envelope. But this is crazy. When Frazier knocked Ali down in the last round, now I was in the last row and there was no scoreboard, but I remember my thought when the punch landed, thinking that's a shot out of a cannon. 50 years, listen to this. 50 years later to the day, I have a grandson born, and my daughter named him Cannon. I mean, that's insane. I mean, you can't make this stuff up.
Yeah. The fact that they were the antithesis of men, the antithesis in style, the antithesis of fighters, made for such a remarkable night.
One's weakness was the other one's strength, and vice versa.
Yeah. Well, let me ask, Smitty, from what I understand, Ali at one point was talking about taking you to New York.
Yeah, when he met my mom on one occasion, and Ali had told me a few days before that he was going to try to take me to the fight, and I had told my mom, and she had to come to the gym. And Angelo said, and I still don't know if this was true or not. I don't even think I want to know, because then I'd end up getting mad at Angelo. But he said that the kids my age weren't allowed in the Garden then. That's what was.
Well, there was a rule. There was a rule technically that
you had to be with an adult.
14, you weren't allowed to see a boxing match. That was on the books.
Yeah, and I was like 11 years old. So
right. So technically, Angelo wasn't lying. But I'm sure. Look, this is Muhammad Ali. He could work his way around the rule. I mean, easily.
But you know what? Night. But you know what? I was with him up until 9 days before that fight, and then later on, I spent so much time with him. My ex-wife got to meet him. My daughter, my kids got to meet him, and I got $20 up there that he gave me. And Ali was the one who later would introduce me to Joe Louis. I met Joe Louis one time. Muhammad Ali introduced me to Joe Louis. All this stuff we're talking about is why I'm so upset with this. With what we have today. It's not a sport anymore. When I got into boxing, it was one of the great sports. This is kind of setting the stage for our podcast tomorrow, but I think it's turned into just events. And although the Ali Frazier was one of the great events, it was a sporting event. And so talking about it with you guys is a breath of fresh air. So I don't have to hear names like Ryan Garcia and Jake Paul and stuff. So
no. I'm caught in the middle. I know Frank is disillusioned about a lot that's going on. Russell Peltz can't stand what's going on with boxing.
I can't stand what's going on.
Yeah. There's a different school of thought I have from time to time. You take the case of Ryan Garcia, and I'm telling myself, Ryan Garcia, he got his rear end kicked by Rolly Romero a fight ago. So should we put much emphasis on it when a fighter loses a fight? But you're right, Smitty, and I've discussed it with Frank. It's entertainment. I used to tell people, don't get this pay-per-view show. You're hurting the sport when you're buying a lousy pay-per-view event. But if you look at it as entertainment, they're entertainers. It's a name brand. Jake Paul gets knocked out by Anthony Joshua. That doesn't end the Jake Paul story. He'll continue on with the right opponents. Ryan Garcia can lose his next fight, for example, but you're always going to have a marketable Mayweather Pacquiao. They're going to go at it again, and they're going to do $1 million.
Do you know when it went downhill? It's amazing that the three of us are here talking about it on this date. Today is the anniversary of Mayweather Castillo won, and if Castillo gets the decision that he should have got, it wouldn't have gone off the rails. But Mayweather kept that undefeated record, and that's what he fought for, and that's when it became a business, because
Frank.
Everybody wants to protect the O.
I know, I get what you're saying. I understand it, but take what would be considered a mega fight today. They're talking about Ryan Garcia and Conor Benn. I mean, give me a break. Conor Benn split 2 fights with Chris Eubanks Sr., and he beat a faded Regis Prograis. Couldn't even stop him. And Ryan Garcia, he wins a decisive decision over Mario Barrios, who could do no better than a draw with a 46-year-old Manny Pacquiao. And Ryan Garcia gets beaten badly by Rolly Romero the fight before that. And the fight before that, he was a cheater.
But Jack, that's my point. These guys, they are personalities. They're not fighters. And that was the beginning of it. Mayweather made the person, at least Ali had the personality, but he backed it up and he fought everybody.
You know, Lee gets mad at me sometimes. I'm careful on the air on our show. I turned down opportunities years ago to have Ryan Garcia on and Jake Paul on. I turned it down, and to this day I won't. And Lee gets a little not upset with me, but he thinks I'm a little, to me, and I think that Ryan Garcia and Connor are club fighters. In my era,
no, that's extreme. That's
I know.
That's
In my day,
extreme.
they were just 10 round fighters. 10 round fighters. There's so many guys at the Fifth Street Gym that would have beat the you know what out of Ryan Garcia. To me, I know. See, I'm glad you feel. I'm glad you. But to me, his skill set, he's got a great left hook. But there's a billion guys that were fighting on Tuesday night club fighters that could beat Ryan Garcia.
I think that's
I'm not far off of that, Smitty.
No, Louis Rodriguez beats Ryan Garcia.
Oh.
I'm not going to argue about something like that. That would be silly. But Ryan Garcia is a very talented fighter.
Why couldn't he beat Raleigh Romero? Why couldn't he beat Raleigh Romero then?
Yeah, well, I can't argue that point. I can't argue the point.
And Tank knocked him out in almost the round I predicted. I'm not saying, I think a lot of it has to do, fighters to me are the most common and uncommon of all athletes. Your book coming out with Michael Spinks, the fighters there are some that come from, middle class, but at the end of the day, I found it out the hard way when I tried to do it professionally. There's something different about a Roberto Duran or a Julio Cesar Chavez, an Aaron Pryor, a Michael Spinks, a Kwawi. They're cut from a different cloth. Ryan Garcia is not cut from that cloth.
Oh, no, yeah, I'm not. I don't mean to defend Ryan Garcia. I just didn't want you to be dismissive of him as no more than a club fighter. I think that's a bit, an extreme. If he was fighting back in the day, for example, he'd maybe crack the top 10 as a contender, but wouldn't be a champion. That I think is a more accurate assessment. He wouldn't be fighting 6 rounders on the,
But look at the 3 fights he's known for. Tank beat the crap out of him. Okay. He cheated against Haney and he lost to Romero. Where's the sizzle?
Yeah, he did beat Luke Campbell. He came off the deck. I see it, but I don't want to defend Ryan Garcia, guys.
No, I think it's good that you I think it's good that you
losing that argument. Yeah. I just don't want to be so dismissive of the guys. For example, like today, you talk about the modern fighters. I don't want to be dismissive of them. Today was the Boston Marathon, for example. The winning time was 2:01 and change. That's insane. When one of my all-time favorites, Billy Rogers, won it 4 years, he ran in the 2:09s 2 of the years. And you're talking about being 8 minutes behind what the guy did today. You're running at that speed. So Billy Rogers couldn't have beat the guys today, but we can safely say that because we have a time clock. You don't have that in boxing. It's
man on man is different though, Jack, than fighting the clock too.
Yeah,
it is different.
Well, let me ask both of you, because you're both seasoned and I respect both of your opinions a lot, that I say, and I was talking to Warfield about this not so long ago. In football, the guys are bigger and stronger and faster and this and that and what have you. I say, to me, boxing is the only sport where they're not as good as they were 20 and 30 and 40. And there's a time where they are better, but the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s.
40s to 70s or 80s. In between guys, there was the pinnacle.
And I've been in the ring with a lot of them as old men. And then as the one, I've been in the ring doing in-rings with Ray Leonard and Holyfield and Tyson and Kwawi and all of these guys. Those guys are better than most of the guys. There are some today that could fight in any. Usyk to me could fight. My good
in
friend
any era.
Bud Crawford could fight in any era. But to me, I think the fighters of today are not as all around.
But why do we pin it down on boxing, Smitty? We were talking football. Let's take the great receiver who's like another dad to Paul Warfield. Great receiver. if you want to call Paul Warfield an all-time great, I won't argue with that. I'm not sure whether his exact numbers would measure up, but he was great. But the catches that Paul Warfield made in his time, he wasn't asked to make those sideline catches that some of the great receivers make today. They make some astonishing catches today. Does that mean they're better than Paul Warfield? No.
Paul didn't have to make those kind of catches because his skill set, he was the best. He was the best pass pattern runner ever, and his separation was so much that he did a little stutter step that he taught me at the sideline because he was way more open.
That's cool stuff. Little Holmes, remember Ike Williams. I love when we can invoke a name like that. Against Bo Jack. Oh, boy.
Smitty, I'll give you my case. I think the only place where technology and the advancement in time and evolution is a factor is in the heavyweight divisions, because 30 years ago, a middleweight still weighed 160.
Yeah.
A light heavyweight still weighed 175. Michael Spinks would take apart Better Beeve and Bivol, and Quali would go through those guys. But when you get guys as big as Tyson Fury and you put Joe Frazier, Ali in there, it's like, let's face it, they didn't fight guys that big.
No,
that's the only place where I see there's a difference. And that's what I like about Usyk, because Usyk, who not only is born on the same day as Ali, but he's the same height and weight. Yeah. And because he can fight, he showed you what skills can do and offset size.
Yeah.
Smitty, I got to give you, just not to go off topic, but we will for a tiny bit. I got to ask you the bonus question that Frank and myself always have a lot of fun with.
And he will get it right. He will get it right.
Who would have won in their prime, in your opinion, between Ken Norton and Ron Lyle?
In their prime.
Both at their peak, both at their very best against one another.
You're not
sure. You don't have to.
Well, I might. I mean, in their prime, like the Norton that beat Ali in San Diego, but Lyle could take a punch. Man, I don't know if they fought 3 times. I think you could have. It could be 1 and 1 and 1.
Okay, toss up this thing.
I'll go with Norton though. I'll go with Norton.
All right, Smitty, I was wrong. I thought you were going to get it right and go with Lyle.
Frank and myself. Frank swears. Yeah, go ahead, Frank.
Yeah, there are some fights I'm just positive about. Lyle would knock Norton out. He owned him psychologically before the first bell. Here's a question I have for you, Smitty. I used to have Angelo Dundee on my ESPN radio show back in the late 90s. And he told me some stories. So let me see if you can just verify one of them. And I also know this because I knew someone that grew up with the fighter. Was Willie Pastrano the playboy that everybody says he was?
I heard he was, but I don't know. I don't know.
Okay. But your impression is he was.
Yeah.
Now, this was a little before my time. I never watched the fight in its entirety. Willie Pastrano winning the title over Harold Johnson. Was that a real robbery? Or is that kind of exaggerated a little bit?
God, I haven't seen that fight in so many years. I would have to, I always like to watch fights that I struggle with 2 or 3 times, In
the gym, who was Ali close with in the gym? Or who were you close with outside of Ali? Were you extra friendly with any other fighter when you were a kid at the Fifth Street gym?
Everybody. Louis Rodriguez, Florentino Fernandez. Louis Cyria was a trainer who was Ali's masseuse, and he doesn't get the credit that he
was a much bigger influence on Ali than people realize.
Yes, he was.
And Ali confided in him a lot more than people realize.
They found Ken Burns did that special on Ali, and I got to thank Ken and his assistant, this gentleman named Ig, because they found footage of me that I had never seen several years ago, and they sent it to me, showing me walking down the street, Miami Beach with Muhammad, and showing me in the background at the gym. And Ali had, and I explained this to Lee, because Ali had a bunch of bodyguards that would watch after me, look after me, because he was always concerned. Ali was concerned at times about getting assassinated, back then. And he would kind of look after me and watch after me. But the Fifth Street Gym, it was just, I had such a great time there with all the different fighters, and it would, even guys like Frankie Otero who came along, and and Jimmy Ellis trained there, and Levi.
That's my all-time favorite. Jimmy Ellis. I mean, how would you rate him?
Oh, Jimmy Ellis needed to be just above middleweight and a light heavyweight at the most, obviously. As a light heavyweight, I mean, he could have been a killer, almost like not as good maybe as Ezzard Charles, but Jimmy was a fantastic. Jimmy could box his ass off, but his mentality was fierce. He was trying to slug with Joe Frazier. Give me a
People
break.
don't realize what a killer Jimmy Ellis was and how fearless he was.
Yes.
He went into that fight with Frazier thinking he was the puncher.
Yeah. Levi Forte was there. Do you guys remember that name?
Went the distance
He
with
fought
George
Foreman.
Yeah.
So
and
many rounds that Foreman fight was. So.
Yeah. So, I mean, there were so many characters.
Wait. Let me ask you about this one character. Were you around Bundini Brown?
Oh, so one time Ali was hitting the speed bag, boppity, boppity, boppity. He's hitting the speed bag and he's talking to me. And I remember Ali saying to me, don't he take this whatever way you want. He liked to call me little white boy. He said, little white boy, what do you want to be if you ever grow up? And I remember saying, I want to be like Johnny Carson and have my own show. And he said to me, Ali says to me, you will be like Carson. You will have your own show because you're just like me. You never shut up. And then I look over to Bundini, and Bundini was crying and talking to himself. And I remember looking at Ali while he's bumpity, hitting the thing, and he just does this, like saying, he's crazy, but I love him, and Bundini was just part of that chemistry, that entourage that was Muhammad Ali.
What about Ali?
When Ali lived in Cherry Hill, Ali rented a little house for him, a little bungalow that he lived in a couple miles away because he didn't want him so close to him. It was like maybe 3-4 miles away. It was off of Crescent Road in Cherry Hill.
Yeah, Frank had a great story when he was in Ali's hotel room. It was just overheard with Miles Davis, is it? Yeah. That's a good story you posted.
Davis Miller.
Davis Miller, I'm sorry. I got it. Rahman Ali, how big an influence was he on Muhammad?
He was part of that. I would watch him occasionally spar with Muhammad. One time they were in a heated sparring thing, and I remember watching Ali. He was having Rahman really take it to him. And Lee Groves' fantastic book, Ali by the Numbers. Here's a little couple of quotes from me. People don't understand the damage that Muhammad Ali took in the gym. That clowning and that rope. He did that rope-a-dope way before the Foreman fight in the gym.
Right.
Do it with Levi Forte, all these guys were trying to beat the you-know-what out of Muhammad. They were trying to, because he would be taunting, and Frank knows this, and you know this, Jack, because you fought. You can put your hands up all you want, but when you're getting hit in the head and those gloves I think there was so much damage done to Ali in the gym, not to mention who he fought. And
no one knew at the time the effect it could take. I mean, the Quarry brothers, Jerry and Mike, would go at it without headgear on, and they'd be banging the heck out of one another all out.
I remember
Go ahead, Jim.
I remember getting into a disagreement with Angelo Dundee when I was just a little radio pup. I knew enough, or I thought I knew enough. I thought I knew everything back then. And I told Angelo, he was on my radio show. This is in the 80s. And I said, obviously, the Parkinson's was brought on by the Ali getting hit. And he really started not arguing, that's too strong, but disagreeing with me. We don't know if it had anything to do with any of it. Ali was predisposed. You know what, Bull? We know there's no doubt that boxing contributed to the demise of Muhammad, like we see with so many fighters at my favorite thing I do in life, and that's host the International Boxing Hall of Fame. It is what it is. It's never going to change. The fighters know it. They accept it, but you can't. That's why they're so special, and they need to be taken so seriously. The sport needs to be taken seriously, and that's why we don't need clowns like Jake Paul degrading.
Well, I know I want to give Jake Paul his due in this sense. He's a promoter. He's doing more for women's boxing now than any other promoter. So I mean, that counts for a lot to me. Just put on a big women's show at Madison Square Garden. You know, a woman fight like Amanda Serrano. Her career was going nowhere. Jake Paul threw her lifeline.
Yeah,
He made
that's
her
fine.
Hall of
That's fine, Jack. But when you go and tell people that you can, and you can say he's just kidding, just joking, the way he skipped the line and was able to do things and fighting old men, and you know, it's degrading to me to see Mike Tyson in there and guys like that. It's degrading for me, and I don't mind if it's a little fun exhibition, but to call it a real fight and you know, to have that on your record with a Jake Paul is disgraceful.
Smitty, let me run this by you. I'm in the minority, but I'll go to my grave believing this. I really believe if Ali never fought Larry Holmes, his later life would have been better. I really believe. I know his career inside and out, but I really believe that night in October, with the medication he was on, his ill health, fighting in that heat, and fighting a guy who could do everything he could do at that time, only better, and smashing him in the head. Ali got hit more hard shots to the head by Larry Holmes, I think, than all of his other fights combined. All the other guys killed his body. Then they went to the head. Larry Holmes was ripping him with jabs and right hands. And to me, I just noticed he just declined so much after that. Where before that, if you go back and you look at the tapes before that, and after that, there's just such a profound difference. And Holmes didn't take it easy on him.
I think Ali was going to have the decline anyway, but you might be right that sped it up, you know, and it was a precipitous decline after that. All you have to do is watch his speech after that.
Before that, his speech wasn't the same before the Holmes fight.
Right. It was
Jack, it was 4 times worse afterwards, and it never came back.
It started getting, like, because he got hit. What about the Chuck Wepner fight? All the rabbit punches. I mean, I could argue that had more of an effect. I mean, you know, I'm not saying you're wrong, Frank. I'm not saying you're wrong, but I don't think you could pin it on.
Well, we may not know when it was, but we know why it was. It was from boxing. It was and Ali's one of his greatest attributes, other than the left jab and the right hand and the great legs, and was
his
the ability
chin
to take a punch.
I mean,
made him lazy.
Once in a while, you get someone who beats the odds. I mean, like for my book, talking to Yaki Lopez, you'd think if anyone would have been affected by the punches, it would be Yaki Lopez. He was great, talking clearly, memory great.
Look at Archie Moore and Jake LaMotta. Their diction was good late in life. I think it had to do with the thickness of your skull, too.
Let's be honest about it. If we go down the list of the greatest fighters pound for pound of all time, look, you know, whatever went on with them. You know, by the way,
nobody escapes
something like this.
Right.
Just
nobody.
Let's just remember Miguel Canto passed away a few days ago, you know, at age 78. I don't know, was it boxing related at all? Maybe it wasn't. But great flyweight champion. I was lucky. I met him at Canastota one year. You know, Gina Aguilera up there, and I got to hang out with Miguel Canto a little at the museum. He just struck me as a very nice man.
Yeah, great, and he was he's shorter than I am. I always love the guys that are diminutive like I am. And so, hey, I know you're going to be there, Jack or Frank. Are you going to be there in a couple of months in Canastota at the hall?
I would like to be. I haven't made plans, but I want to get there.
Yeah, be great to see. Of course, Jack, I know you'll be there, and hopefully they'll pop you on stage with me with Michael. The big.
Well, no, I don't think that's happening. So
No?
they got basically their schedule, you know, events, whatever. So I talked about it. I don't think anything particular, but it's the 50th anniversary of the '76 Olympic team. So I know the way it works at the Hall of Fame. They're going to have those guys moving all over. They're not going to stay still for a while. And I don't think there's going to be a ringside lecture like with all of them together. They'll just be moving from point to point. But
I haven't gotten the roster yet. They haven't. I'll get the roster in a week or so. Do you guys think that '76 team is perhaps one of the greatest Olympic teams ever, right?
76-84, which was a better
So it comes
team.
down to Leonard and Spinks versus Holyfield and Whitaker.
Yeah. Wow. That's yeah.
So
Yeah.
who gets the edge there?
That is, yeah. That I still,
It's
I still go with 76. I'll go with 76.
I'll go Leonard over Whitaker, Spinks and Holyfield. They're two of my favorites. That's a tough call.
Yeah,
That's a
but
tough
in
call.
In 84, the Cubans and the Russians boycotted the Olympics.
That's true.
That wasn't the case in 76.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean, I think the 84 team, you could say, was a little deeper, perhaps, or, all around. You'd get a fighter like Virgil Hill, who was a silver medalist. So I think it was a little deeper in that.
A lot of people don't realize that the Cubans didn't, they weren't part of the Olympics until 72. That was their first year at the Olympics. I don't know if you guys were aware of that.
Was that Teofilo Stevenson in the game?
Yes, that was the first time for the Cubans at the Olympics, and they made a splash.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I still though, with one of my great memories in Canastota, we celebrated April the 1st was the 22nd straight year that my television show In This Corner has been on the air, and I'm going to try my best, if my body will hold up, to do about maybe 15 more shows. But one of my greatest things was the in-ring I did with Ray Leonard when he knocked the crap out of me with a left hook inside the or in the ring there in Canastota. There's talk that I might do an in-ring with Gennady Golovkin if we can set it up and make it happen. And that'll be the first in-ring that I've done since the last one I did was with Devin Haney some years ago. And I like Devin. He's a good fighter, but I'm more excited about Gennady Golovkin.
Yeah,
Smitty, I sparred Ray Leonard in 79.
Uh-huh. How'd you
And
do?
he hit me with a triple left hook, elbow, shoulder, chin. And when he went to the shoulder, he hit the elbow, then he hit the shoulder, and I dropped my hand, and he came right over to the chin. Now, he didn't throw everything he had, but he buzzed me real good, and I said, that was a setup, wasn't it? He goes, Frank, you're one of the few guys that picked that up. This was right before he fought Tony Schiavone in June of 1979. He came to Frazier's gym, and there weren't a lot of guys there to spar, and I was the closest guy to his size.
Hey, James, I mean, this was a blast having you on. I'm not sure what I enjoyed talking about more. I loved it both, boxing or football. And we're not disillusioned with football, I don't think. We are bit with boxing, even though this is a boxing show and you do a boxing show. But you experience so much, I mean, with the Fifth Street Gym.
Smitty, I try to tell Jack all the time, and I used to tell Mac, football fans watch boxing. Boxing fans watch football. I really think they go together a lot, and I don't mind mixing them to a degree, but it's like football fans watch boxing, and most boxing fans watch a lot of football.
And no matter how much longer we're talking about football, and it's been made easier for the Dolphins with the schedule, there's still 10 years from now when we're doing this again, there's still going to be only one damn team in Perfectville, and that'll be my 1972 and Frank's 1972 Miami Dolphins.
And you know what? To put a period on that in a negative facts committee, and guess what? They'll still only have 2 Super Bowl wins.
And my New York
in 10 years.
10 years from now, I hope to be able to say they made the playoffs. Their consecutive non-playoff streak isn't up to 25 years.
And
but Jack, their most recent playoff win is sooner than Miami's. The Dolphins have the longest playoff drought in the NFL.
Well, the Jets have the longest. But Smitty, it's been a real blast having you come on. Thanks a lot. We, hope you could come on in the future. When your book comes out, let us know, and you'll come on and, you'll talk about it.
Okay, and I'll try not to call Ryan Garcia a club fighter.
Smitty, I never met you before. Nice talking to you.
Yeah, great guys. Okay. You guys do a great job.
Thanks a lot, Smitty.
Thank you.
All the best. So that's it, Frank. We got about a minute left. Anything to wrap up or what? It was great. Oh, I guess next week I lined up Aaron Snowell who was in has trained a number of name heavyweights, was Mike Tyson's chief trainer the night he lost the title to Buster Douglas. The Aaron
And I want to run a story by him regarding Muhammad Ali up at Deer Lake Camp, where Ali talked about leaving money in a suitcase and left the room to see who would take any of the money. And Aaron Snowell was one of the guys, and I think he how did it go? I forget, but he was in the room and nobody took the money, and Ali went and told his mother about how good the kids were, and I think that's the story. Something back in Deer Lake.
Okay, cool. Okay, Frank, great show. We had a lot of fun. See you next week.
Smitty was good. All right, Jack, we'll talk.